So excited today to be joined with Senator Adam Schiff from California. Senator, great to be here with you. I really want to jump right in and get your reaction to some of the big news of the day, but also of the week, and start with Donald Trump's decision to extend the 90-day pause on tariffs, or this 90-day arrangement when it comes to Mexico, along with his 50% tariffs on Brazil. And just what is your initial reaction to kind of the economic policy of this administration right now, one day before all these tariffs are supposed to go into effect?
Well, this is exactly the wrong way to handle tariffs or economic policy. That is to keep changing it every 5 minutes, to set a deadline and then ignore the deadline. It means that businesses can't make any kind of plans. They don't know what kind of inventory to have. They don't know what the cost of their goods are going to be. At the end of the day, we all pay the price for this in higher taxes and higher costs that we incur because those tariffs are essentially a tax on consumers. So our prices are going up. The impacts on the economy are just starting to really be felt in a painful way. But what he's doing with Brazil, I think, is different in kind than the on again, off again tariffs on Mexico. Because with Brazil, we have a very positive trade balance. So it seems like a weird candidate to be engaging in a trade war with a country in which you're selling a lot more to them than you're buying from them. But the reason Donald Trump is imposing tariffs on Brazil is because Brazil is prosecuting their insurrectionist in chief. That is Bolsonaro, their strongman, led an insurrection after he lost his reelection, and he's being prosecuted for it. And of course, Trump views that as a danger to himself and an affront to dictators everywhere. So he's putting tariffs on Brazil to try to get them to stop prosecuting Bolsonaro, and just went beyond the tariffs to try to impose sanctions
Hmm.
on the judge in that case. So very different reasons, but an equally bad destructive economic impact for Americans.
Right now, there are a couple cases heading through the court system regarding these tariffs. There was actually oral argument today in one of them. Is there anything that you all can do in the United States Senate or in Congress generally to block the tariffs from taking effect either now or later on after they've already been in effect for some time?
There is, and in fact, Tim Kaine offered a privilege resolution to try to end the emergency that Donald Trump declared, the false emergency in that case over trade with Canada, in order to end at least the tariffs with Canada. And we came within a single vote of getting that passed. I think they had to bring the vice president in to vote that down. So we had a number of Republicans supporting our efforts. Now, you can only bring those privilege resolutions to a vote periodically. So when the next window opens, we will undoubtedly bring another. But it does show there's bipartisan alarm over this tariff policy. And we're going to use every tool that we can to try to fight back.
Now, I do want to ask you about something else that happened over the past 24, 48 hours, and that's Emil Bove. He has been confirmed after debate for weeks, after multiple whistleblowers coming out. He's now has lifetime tenure on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and personally, I think they're setting him up to potentially even be a Supreme Court nominee at some point if there's a vacancy. Could you give me your reaction to his confirmation going through, and what should folks know now that he is a judge in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals?
After the original batch of horrible cabinet nominees, the RFKs, the Tulsi Gabbards, and the Pete Hegseth and others, this is probably the worst high-profile nominee. Emil Bove was, acting at a very high level in the Justice Department until his appointment. You had Pam Bondi, criminal defense lawyer for Trump, at the number one position. You had Blanche, another criminal defense lawyer for Trump, at the number two position. Bove, another criminal defense lawyer for Trump, at the number three position. And he used and abused that position to dismiss the corruption case against the mayor of New York, so that they could leverage him for cooperation with their immigration policy, something totally unethical that caused many veteran prosecutors to quit rather than participate in that kind of illegality. But then you had him essentially try to push investigations without any evidence when it came to the environmental fund, just so that they could try to stop money that had been appropriated from going out. You had several whistleblowers come forward to say that he was encouraging Justice Department lawyers to say F you to the courts and ignore court orders, which they did in immigration cases. Worst possible candidate for a lifetime appointment to a court of appeals. But Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, notwithstanding some of them in the past being vocal supporters of whistleblowers, refused to hear any of three whistleblowers that had come forward in their testimony about how Bove deceived the Congress during his confirmation hearings and was involved in trying to encourage the Justice Department to lie and misrepresent to the courts and ignore their orders. So, very dangerous person now on the Court of Appeals. Another total capitulation by Republicans. And as you say, I think they're positioning this utter sycophant
Hmm.
to one day be on the Supreme Court.
And we'll see what happens there. There is a nominee, though, and his name is Bill Asaley, who's the acting U.S. attorney for the Central District of California in Los Angeles, who has made some headlines that not enough people are talking about right now. And according to a Bloomberg Law article that I'm sure you read, he was quoted saying, "Fuck the Justice Manual," when it came to pursuing prosecution of individuals where there may not be enough evidence or prosecutions that may be deemed political by senior Justice Department officials. Could you talk more about that and whether or not there's anything going on right now within the United States Senate to potentially prevent Asali from staying on in kind of perpetuity?
So Bill Asaley was this right-wing state legislator known basically for his temper tantrums and his outbursts, which even members of his own party, I think, had serious problems with. He then is named by Trump as the interim U.S. attorney. He's not nominated because even Trump knew how disqualified he was. He would never get confirmed. But in an end run around that, instead of nominating him, they decided to appoint him first assistant U.S. attorney. And having no U.S. attorney, he would then become acting U.S. attorney and get another period of time, 210 days, where he could do further damage. And what we have seen already in his short tenure is he keeps going before the grand jury in cases where they don't have enough evidence, as, for example, against people who were protesting these immigration raids. And even though the standard in the grand jury is just probable cause to believe that somebody committed a crime, the grand juries are refusing to indict. And when that happens, and I was in that very office in the Central District of California, I was a prosecutor there for 5 or 6 years. It is very rare to present a case to a grand jury and have them refuse to indict. And when they do, it's called a no bill of indictment. And he has now earned the nickname, apparently, among the prosecutors in that office as No Bill Asaley, because even he can't get an indictment returned. And when he made those comments, which were overheard by a grand jury, basically on the phone screaming at the Justice Department, "Fuck the Justice Manual," what he was specifically referring to is the manual says that you don't just bring an indictment in the grand jury based on probable cause unless you believe that ultimately you can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. And Asaley's view is, fuck that. I'm just
Right.
going to indict people. Whether I can actually convict them doesn't matter. I want to make a political statement. And that is such a horrible and dangerous abuse of power.
So I guess we'll see what happens because you have him, Jim Pirro, Alina Habba. There are a full host of U.S. attorney nominees who are a lot of cause for concern for a lot of folks across the country. One final question on redistricting because it's going to impact California likely soon. Do you support Governor Newsom and the state legislature potentially redistricting the state if Texas Republicans go through and redistrict their state in kind of a mid-decade redistricting cycle?
Reluctantly, I have to say, yes, I do, absolutely. And I say reluctantly because it's a terrible road to go down. First of all, Texas should never do what they're doing. They've already gerrymandered their state. One thing people need to know is Texas, which is Republican legislature, Republican governor, have already drawn the lines to elect Republicans, which is why the Republican Texas delegation is already so lopsided with Republican members. They want to make it even worse. And why? Because Donald Trump, having pushed through now the second most unpopular bill in modern history, the big ugly bill, the most unpopular being the effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Trump is desperately worried about losing his majority, and he wants to try to rig the game. And he has badgered Texas into going through this mid decade reapportionment, which almost never happens and has never happened for this reason. But if they do, if they go down that road, then we're going to have to respond. In California, we're going to have to respond. In New York, we're going to have to respond. In New Jersey, we're going to have to respond. We have ungerrymandered in California. We have an independent commission draw the lines. That is the way it should be. But if they're going to try to rig the election, we can't let them get away with it and tilt the playing field that way. So, yes, California will need to respond. I would support that. At the end of the day, though, and where I hope we end up is we need a national redistricting reform that prohibits any state from engaging in a partisan gerrymander, that requires every state to use an independent commission. I was arguing that should have been the first thing we did under Biden when we controlled both houses of Congress, a voting rights bill and a national redistricting reform. That was a terrible missed opportunity, and we can't make that mistake again.
Well, thank you, Senator, for coming on. We'll see what happens next. Appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Hey folks, Aaron Parnas here. Thank you so much for watching The Parnas Perspective. Please consider subscribing to support our work as we grow this independent news media entity into something that rivals mainstream every single day. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.